we're going to be talking about the spooky Curse of Strahd. We're not really talking about too many of the horror elements, though. We're just going to be talking about Esmeralda d'Avenir, which is French for something. I'm going to look that up. What's it French for? Her name is basically Esmeralda of the future. That's very interesting. Thank you, Google Translate. Not fully sure if that's real. If we have a French audience member, which we can't look at yet, because there aren't enough of you. But yeah, that's what that means. I really like Esmeralda as a character, and I think that if you play her right, there's a lot of fun elements that you can use with her. So, one thing to get out of the way, in original publications of Curse of Strahd, Esmeralda was pictured, she has a prosthetic leg. She was described as having, like, she takes great measures to hide it. And people are like, why does she need to hide it? So Wizards of the Coast was like, oh, I'm sorry, and now she doesn't hide it anymore. And they also changed a lot of the, because they basically called the Vistani gypsies, which is offensive. So they've changed that. I might get demonetized for saying that. Well, we don't get monetized in the first place, it's fine. Not yet, anyway. Who knows, we might skyrocket soon enough. Esmeralda's very fun. I liked playing her. She even tagged along the party for a session or two, and it didn't seem too dmpc to say it lightly. You know dmpcs and why they're bad. Didn't feel like that. She was just kind of along for the ride, and it made sense, and then she left after it. That's kind of how you should play her. She's a dmpc written right, and she can definitely be used up for a lot of interesting elements. There are about 4 or 5 different events that take place involving Esmeralda. There's a few places that she can turn up. She is, you'll originally find her in the Abbey in Kretsk. It's the Abbey of St. Markovia. I'll probably talk about that at some point. It's a very interesting location in my opinion. But she's out there, and there's a reason. And she might encounter the party and will generally... I played her as somewhat standoffish until the party were pretty upfront about their dislike for the vampire, at which point she promptly, being a chaotic, good, naive kid, just threw away all that inhibition and was like, okay, I'm gonna help you guys storm Castle Ravenloft. Not exactly how it went down. There were a few incidents. In particular, she was walking around the castle with greater invisibility and stabbed one of the party members when they opened a door out of a reflex. And damn it, that was her 4th level spell slot, just gone. Talking about stats for a second, she is a very diverse character, and one that I don't know if a player could ever really manage to play in terms of D&D mechanics. She is basically the equivalent of like a wizard fighter. It's pretty interesting, but it's not exactly like an Eldritch Knight. She's a 7th level wizard, as well as being a very capable fighter with a multi-attack. It's interesting. She's a very interesting character. She also has magic stuff out the wazoo. She's got a +1 rapier. She has a silvered short sword. She has a +1 hand axe. She has 2 potions of greater healing, and I think maybe 4 vials of holy water, and a bunch of stakes. She is prepared, man. She's very prepared. Very, very, very prepared. It's very cool. I find that if you... Here's the thing. This campaign kind of really wants you to have Esmeralda as your final ally for the final fight, but there's so many more interesting things you can do with her. I used her in a very interesting way. I'll tell you about that in a sec. But her utter preparedness can really set her up for some really bad situations. She could die. She could get killed near the end game to instill a lack of hope in the characters. She could end up turning. She could become a vampire spawn herself. Who knows? There's a lot of interesting things you can do with her. And she is probably, other than maybe Rudolf van Richten, like the most kitted out to be a very useful asset to the party. Well, there's also Sir Godfrey, a Revenant Paladin. I want to talk about him next. He's so cool, man. We're actually gearing up to do the final fight for Curse of Strahd in about 3 weeks. And God, am I excited. Some interesting ways that you could use Esmeralda. She turned up to try and save a party member's ass, and was unsuccessful in doing so. She wasted a greater healing potion on the guy, and he died, the character. I didn't plant her there just to come in and save the day and be very cool. She was already there. I planned to put her in the encounter. It was, I really... Curse of Strahd's cool. It has a few situations where characters are in different places as they are designated in the module. It doesn't do that enough, I feel. They definitely got on board with the idea of it being the world moving without the characters really doing much. I'd kind of planned a route that she could potentially go around in Barovia, and they'd kind of crossed paths at one point, but she was invisible and was staking out the Wizard of Wine's winery because it had been taken over by a bunch of blights, and she was sussing that out. And then the party came along and started shooting them all, and she was like, well, okay. And then kind of stayed invisible for a while, but killed a few at the back, and then appeared when someone was very low and unconscious and entangled. That was a very bad situation to be in. And my players were like, wait a minute, is this an actual encounter in the module? I find that as well, she can be... Wizards aren't treated that well in Curse of Strahd. And if she dies and the party manages to grab her, there is her spellbook just lying there. And it's up for grabs, and the wizard can use it. And when I gave my party 3 weeks of downtime, the wizard basically spent almost all of it scribing spells from Esmeralda's book. I'll talk about what I did to her. At level either maybe 7 or 8, I forget, they fought a bunch of Vistani and werewolves who teamed up. At this point in the campaign, the entire part of Barovia, just the whole of Barovia, went into a pitch blackness because Strahd got angry and started sending Vistani and werewolves to go and kill the party. And they did that. They had some direwolves and they fought, and fucking wizard did some cool stuff and destroyed my encounter. If you didn't do that, that would have been a very lethal encounter. But as a final kind of screw you, I love my players, don't get me wrong, but in Curse of Strahd you kind of have to pull this stuff sometimes. They kind of had the dead body of Esmeralda just lying next to them during the fight, and while our gunslinger was holding a barrel of a musket right up to one of the Vistani, they saw that and just blasted their face off. It was very interesting, and they took her stuff. Well, they didn't really. They picked her up and kind of put her to rest, if you would. And then Rudolf van Richten inherited her items. It was quite interesting. He's walking around with a +1 rapier now instead of his sword cane, which is very, very cool, don't get me wrong. It's kind of shit in terms of mechanics, if you ask me. Esmeralda can show up in a lot of different ways. She can appear in Castle Ravenloft as well. There's a random encounter in Castle Ravenloft where she actually is in greater invisibility, and she taps on one of the party's shoulders and she's like, hey, what's up? Come in this room. And yeah, she was basically on like a session dungeon crawl with them after doing that. Or at least, well, she actually stabbed one of the party members in that. But yeah, she's very fun to use in general. If by some miracle, actually most parties do eventually kill Strahd von Zarovich, if they do, and the mists part, Esmeralda hangs around Barovia. I've always had an idea for like an aftermath campaign where all the characters are level 10 and they've just beaten Strahd and like they've all gone on their separate ways, and a really, really old Rudolf van Richten goes to all of them and he's like, it fucking happened again. And they're all like, well, I guess this is our responsibility. She's probably there going, I knew it! Everyone has their own different stances to when Strahd gets destroyed, and Esmeralda's is the most correct. Rudolf just buggers off. He's like, nah, can't be bothered with this. I'm done. That was my last job. And it really is his in my campaign. Esmeralda died, and he had a bit of a thing. Esmeralda kind of sees him as kind of like a father figure, really, which is quite interesting, because I killed her and the party had to break it to Rudolf, and he was like, well, can I take her stuff? It didn't go exactly like that, but that was a part of the conversation in a much more eloquent way than can I take my dead daughter's stuff. Esmeralda's a really fun character to play as a DM, but make sure not to overuse her. That's a thing that I've seen other people do. Don't get me wrong, I really respect, like, I think in Chris Perkins' run of it, Mark Sherlock Humes was Esmeralda, which I love, I dig it. I think he was in for quite a few episodes, kind of walking around. Oh my god, Into the Mists, the official D&D, like, current stream for Curse of Strahd. Esmeralda, who was being played by, and I mean, she's being played okay. She's being played okay. The girl playing her goes from, she mood swings a lot. But basically, she's been in for almost like 10 sessions now. Don't do that. Don't steal from the players at all. Don't even do that as like a player being a guest NPC. It will really wear off the novelty. And yeah, I've seen people try that. It's not wise. Don't do that. But yeah, here's me in Laura's bedroom doing a new episode for you. Thank you for watching. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Do it, please. Thank you. I'm in a very nice mood today. I'm gonna say nicely. I'm gonna ask nicely that you give us your love and affection. Please do it.